when I was on the phone and I heard that he was killed, I crumbled. I fell, like I was thrown to the ground. If you've already lost a child and you're in that pain, that pain is so bad. If you're in that pain, then I just encourage you to ask yourself, how can you get out of it? And is it worth sitting in it? Because there really is beauty on the other side.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Flip Your Mindset. I am your host, Stacey Uhrig, and today's guest is Julie Spears. Let me tell you a little bit about Julie before we get into her story. So Julie Spears is a grief mama with 7 years of personal experience navigating the unique and challenging path of grief. Drawing from a lifetime of trauma and 2 decades as a kidney disease coach, she offers compassionate and personalized 12-week grief coaching sessions. She is in the 30A area in Florida, so she offers in-person sessions with the option of paddleboard therapy. I love that, to complement the healing journey in nature. She hosts transformative grief retreats, which is actually how I heard about her, because somebody had gone on her retreat and reached out and said, I really think you need to connect with Julie. There, she creates a safe space for deeper healing, connection, and community. Her approach is holistic, acknowledges the interconnectedness of individual grief and trauma. No one should eat this crap sandwich alone, she says. So she's here to walk with you in the darkness of days. So welcome so much, Julie. I am so grateful to have you here today.
Thank you. I want to say it's an honor to be here, but it's a strange way to say it's an honor to be here to talk about grief, but it just is what it is. So
I appreciate that. And as we get into your story, I think people will understand that a little bit more. You know, it kind of makes me think of this idea of there's a gift in the challenge and a purpose in all pain. And when I created those 2 sayings, I was very mindful of how that would affect somebody just like you. Somebody who's lost their child, who would, excuse my French, say, F off, because I would never want to lose my child. That's never the purpose of that statement. The statement is we cannot control some of the most horrific things that do occur in our lifetimes. But when the dust can settle, there are pieces of gold glitter somewhere that it's not to say you would want the gold glitter instead of having your child back. Never would say that. But if we can accept the reality of it and then find the gift in the challenge, which today the gift really is, in my opinion, your forthcomingness, because it is my hope that someone is listening today that perhaps unfortunately shares a similar story that will feel less alone. That's the gift. That maybe will know that there's someone that they can go to that understands their type of grief. So setting that stage, you are someone who's been coping with the loss of a child, and you recognize that that's unique and individual for each person. And I'm wondering if you're willing to share with us your child's name, tell us a little bit about him, and how you came to this loss.
Yeah. So Zach was 16 when he was in his car accident. You know his name. His name is Zach. And oh my gosh, from the beginning, he was like that wild child that just, when he walked in the room, everybody knew that he was in the room. It didn't matter if he was happy, mad, or sad, you would know how Zach felt and that he was in your presence. He just had that way about him. And growing up was just like all over the place, all smiles, the baseball kid, the football kid. You knew that he wanted to play, and you knew when he was on the field because he was giving it his all. You know, he was just there for the party. So yeah, he was just crazy. But later on in life, his dad and I started having some trouble with our marriage. And, you know, when you're in it, you just can't really see where the struggle is, you know, because you're so far in your own place. But looking back now, I see where Zach and Taylor, my other son, witnessing the struggles between, their dad and myself, it caused more harm to them because I would get mad at them for what their dad wasn't doing. It was like I was going to take it out on my kids. So I believe that through some of those things and just through life hardships, he found the wrong crowd. He found the wrong things. And I was the mom who was like, you will not do those things, like, how dare you? What will people think? And that was probably, right or wrong, I think it doesn't matter. People will say, well, you can't go back and look back. And I think you should go back and look back at the way you reacted or behaved in things, because I think it's a lesson in an improvement going forward. No, I can't change it, but I can absolutely maybe make a difference or help somebody else who's in the same situation. And I think for me, I didn't notice it then, but somebody may be in that situation and you may notice it now. But through Zach's
May I
journey,
ask you a
and
question?
yeah,
So you said, he got in with what you're going to say is the wrong crowd, doing the wrong things. Can you share what it was that he was doing? Because it's really important for people to understand that why people start to get involved in things that maybe will end up being harmful to them.
Yeah, it was drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, though, is I don't know if it was a large amount or a small amount. To me, it was just a mom amount, like a mom with, at the time he was 12. And so, a mom with a 12-year-old, and it just sent me for a panic.
Of course it did.
With that being said, I did what I knew to do or what I thought was right to try to help Zach. And unfortunately, in the state of Alabama, there's a child right law. And basically, what that law says is a child who lives in the state of Alabama at the age of 14, by now we're at 14, is able to make their own healthcare choices. So from the age of 12 to the age of 14, it was, okay, trying to figure out, what was going on, how could I help my child, restrictions and arguments and all of these things. And then by the age of 14, when it had gotten to the point to where this was really bad, I could no longer help Zach. It was almost like living in this movie where I'm seeing my world and my child's life fall apart in front of me, and there's literally nothing I could do.
First of all, thank you for sharing that. And second of all, my heart goes out to you because I can't imagine how frustrating that must have felt. And that powerlessness and that helplessness, I think, is really what, as parents, is very traumatic for us sometimes when we're parenting, right? It's that fear. I just want to address something really quickly because I think, it is our natural tendency. And you did say when you know better, you can do better. But it is our natural tendency to try to shame and fear our kids out of doing things we don't think is in their best interest. Say, for example, drugs. That's our natural thing. It's, what can I do? I'm going to scream. I'm going to yell. I'm going to punish. I'm going to set boundaries. I'm going to take things away from you because maybe if I do those things, then you'll get it. And what I really just want to quickly address is when it comes to substance use, very often, I'm not saying all times, but very often, the beginning of substance use is a desire to numb out. And so instead of punishing, we need to start asking, why? Why are you doing that? And if they say, because I'm stressed or because I'm anxious or because I don't feel well or whatever it is that they're going to say, our next natural inclination is, oh, that's ridiculous. What we need to do if we have a child who is struggling with substance use or any kind of harming behavior, it could be cutting, it could be anything that we know is not safe for our child. The first thing to do is to ask why. And the second thing to do is to listen. And the third thing to do is to keep the space open for open dialogue. Because the moment they think that spigot is closed, we're losing them. Right? Yep. So it's so natural for us to scream. I have been there. scream, fear, shame. How can you? Why can't you? All of the things. And we're really not asking the right questions. We're really just needing to ask one, what's going on? I see that you're using drugs. Do you want to tell me about that? Do you want to, what is it that you're trying to run away from? Now, look, I've got a 19-year-old and a 14-year-old. I'm no fool when it comes to parenting boys. The likelihood that they're going to respond with a whole chapter of information is very unlikely. But at least they know that the space is open for the conversation. So when I share that, how does that resonate with you?
I hear it, but I think on my end, it wasn't so much what my child was doing. It was what was I not doing, or what could I as a parent do better? And how could I more so become almost like a unity with them? And here's the reason I say that. When my children got older, it was almost like we separated paths, even though I was still their parent, but it was like I had my life, they had their life, and then we had our combined life. So today, thinking about things, being absorbed in myself. And of course, I can say this because he's no longer here, so I don't expect somebody that's sitting there to have this kind of thought process. But again, my hope is that will help. But, I spent time in my room with them in their rooms. Or, they would want to go eat and I would be so angry, I would not. So I think in looking back, it's how could I use the situation to find a way to seep into their lives where it's not intrusive, but more so welcomed. And maybe that's sacrificing time shopping or whatever it was, but, sacrificing time to say, well, we're going to go to dinner anyway. You did these things, but we're going to go anyway because I love you, not because it's a deserving thing, but because you're my child and I love you. Or, yes, you're in trouble, but you're in your room all the time. I enjoy these things. You enjoy these things. Let's go spend time together because, we do want time with our children, but it's so flipping hard when they're in this, rage and we're in this rage. It's easier to just be angry and separate spaces and separate rooms. But
such a good point.
For me, I wish I'd have looked at it a little differently that way.
I love that you brought that up because what it makes me think of is I love you, but I'm not loving the choice. I love you, but I don't like or love the decisions, the actions, the behaviors. And you are not your behavior. You are not your decisions. And I think that is such a huge concept for people to start to wrap their mind around. We all do stupid things. Now, there's a spectrum. And when our kids are on an extreme end of the spectrum and we're terrified, it's hard to see the forest through the trees, which is why this podcast episode is so important. But to understand that, we are not our mistakes and we are not, the decisions that we make, good or bad. We're just a source of love and light. And when we can connect to that source energy, that person's authentic self, we know it's in there somewhere. It's not ever gone. Maybe it's just a little dimmer or a little quieter or a little smaller. Letting our children know, I love you, but I don't love the choice, I think is such a huge message. And you are not your choice.
Yeah.
Right. So you lose your child eventually at 16. Can you share with us what happened?
Yes. So from the age of 14 to 16, we actually moved to try to find him a new place, a new start. For the first year, that was pretty good. But then it got to where it was almost like he was above the law. There was still no help, no support, even though we had moved states. And
can you just share that for a second? What do you mean? I really want people to understand the story. So what do you mean when you say there was no support and no help, despite the fact that you moved from a state that had this child law where he could take care of his own health starting at 14? You moved to where? Florida, right? You had told me that?
To Florida.
Mm-hmm. And what are you saying when you're saying there was no help or support?
Yep. So we moved to Florida because Alabama was at the age of 14, your children can make their own healthcare choices. So we moved to Florida thinking that A, we could give him a new start, new place, new start, new identity. And then B, plus I had children that were taking drugs to his bedroom door. So I was like, I can't deal with that. I gotta move away from this. And once we got to Florida, my hope was that, if something did happen, that the law would be taken into the law's hands and that I would have some kind of support system there. But it was not that way. So there were so many things that happened. But an example would be he was smoking pot with our upstairs neighbors at the age of 14, because by now he's still 14 when we moved. But he was smoking with the neighbors upstairs, who were adults, by the way, and there were no consequences on either side. So it's just little things like that, which, looking back, it may or may not be a big deal. But when you're in the heat of the moment and you're trying to save your child, it is a huge deal, especially for police and law enforcement to take the side of a child when you know that, you're in this deep, dark dungeon and you're trying to save their life. And it could also be going to school. He wasn't forced to go to school. I could not force him to go to school, but yet the police clearly were going to arrest me for my child being tardy or not attending school. I couldn't do anything.
And just describe that. I think it's really important because, gosh, school avoidance is such a massive thing right now. I know it makes sense to you and it makes sense to me, but I want to get discreet for the listener. So when you say I can't force him to go to school, describe that.
In the behavior of the moment, when you are trying to make a child go to school that does not want to be there, especially a teenage boy, he's not going.
Right. There's no movement. There's no movement.
There's no movement. And you will pay for that interaction for months. And I think that's the time where you say the things you don't want to say and it's hurtful, and we just eat our hearts out, with just the anger that pours in those, and that 5 minutes of screaming trying to get your child to school, but the reality is I was not going to make him go. He had to choose to go. And my thing was at this time is I have this child. I don't know how to help. I don't know what to do as a mom. I needed help myself through counseling and just through support systems, and they were nowhere to be found. And basically what I was told is that we have to arrest your child. There has to be an arrest made, or he has to be a ward of the state in order for us to find ways to support you and your child. And I didn't have that.
Guys, this is the pure example of a very, very, excuse my language, fucked up, broken system.
Was.
So basically, we'll react, but we're not going to help proactively prevent.
Yes.
And we wonder why we're having so many challenges in this country with addiction, anxiety, depression, suicidality,
divorce, because
so
it affected my whole marriage, because I am in this crazy state. And the other part is Zach. He was so good looking and he was so sweet. And so when people talk to him, they're like, who is this crazy mom going berserk over this child who's like a star football player? So it really made it even that much more difficult. But to make matters worse, I had found this place that he could go that would accept him not far from the house. We were all ready for him to attend this boys' home, for just for coaching and for some counseling. And because his dad and I were divorced, he could have lived there.
Okay.
Because his dad and I were divorced, I had full custody. His dad and I had joint legal custody, which most custody papers are written. He was not allowed to go. Both mom and dad have to agree to the care for the child to receive. So even though we had all this documentation in black and white, we had all of these previous situations. He still was not admitted
And
into
is
this
this
home.
because your ex-husband was not willing to sign?
Correct. So, I mean, it was almost like, sorry, we can't help your child from every direction. So by the age of 16, we had just been through hell pretty
Yeah.
much. You know, we had one good year when we first moved here. That was, you know, better than normal. So I'm going to cling to that year because that was pretty good. But as he approached April 2016, it was spring break here at the beach. And he was right in the middle of it. And I don't know what all happened. I just know that when he would come home, he would not want to wake up in the mornings. When he came home, you know, I would say be home by 6. He may be home by 9. Football practice, he may or may not be there it was just like, what is going on in this world? I could not find any
When you tried
resolution.
to
I could
talk
not find
to
any
the
peace.
school, what was their
Yeah.
response?
Their response, well, first of all, I showed up to the school to pick my child up, and he was nowhere to be found a couple times. I would walk into the school and see on their board written up where it would say, try to avoid write-ups. I would also was in the belief that my child was making A's and B's, but because here we are in a conference with the school that my child is not doing great, I learned that he really wasn't making A's and B's, but they were allowing him to take his tests multiple times. So I'm thinking, like, Zach, you're making A's and B's. I mean, if you would just do good, you could have whatever you wanted. He really wasn't making A's and B's. He was failing. And in addition to that, Zach was basically targeted in a way of, we're not going to do write ups, but we're going to write Zach up for throwing down like candy wrappers. So the big things were not being addressed. It was more so the very minor things that would make a parent want to pull their hair out. Whereas if the school would have just said, hey, mom, here's the reality, because we were going to the school saying, we want to help my child. But I think because of past lawsuits and situations, they felt their hands were tied to share the truth. And I wasn't picking up from the, you know, the hints that they were putting out, the subtle hints.
So where does that lead you?
So that led to Zach getting a car. I did not buy him a car. His dad bought him a car. And he got the car on a Thursday. And Sunday night, Zach decided to buy 2 cases of beer from a gas station at the age of 16. So he bought those 2 cases of beer, and later on that night decided to drive. And unfortunately, he didn't make it. He was on his way here, and he didn't make it. His car, he overcorrected, and his car hit a huge tree, and the car caught fire.
I'm so sorry.
That happened on November 20th of 2016. And we found out on November the 17th that he had been a John Doe.
Say that again.
The accident happened on the 20th of November, but I did not find out until the 21st because he had been a John Doe and he was not able to be identified.
Understood. Guys, it's so important that we talk about these stories because I know that Julie's story is unfortunately not unique. It might be a little bit of a different flavor. It might be a little bit of a different scenario, but I'm sure that there's someone that is listening that either has said, that is my story, or that's my niece's story, or my nephew's story, or my friend's story. This is happening too much. There are a lot of broken systems that are, not allowing our children to get the proper support. Did anything ever happen with that gas station?
No. So unfortunately, there is no law that prevents alcohol sales to minors.
Is that in the state of Florida?
It's in the state of Alabama. It's in most states. There are a few states that have a stricter law, and just like the age. And so, like I think it's North Carolina or South Carolina, they're trying to get the law to where it's the age of 12 for a child to make their own healthcare choices. 12. So imagine a parent who has a child doing drugs and they cannot get their child help because the age of 12. But it's the same with alcohol and minor sales. So at the age of 16, or any minor age, the clerk has the fine of $500. Sometimes it's more. But in our case, the clerk was still there 2 years later serving alcohol to minors. And while Zach did wrong, he absolutely did wrong. There's no denying that. But at the same time, it should not be allowed for a clerk to sell alcohol to minors. So anyway, we went through a court battle with two attorneys for probably 3 years. And at the end, our justification was that the clerk was no longer to sell alcohol in the state of Alabama. And then the gas station did sell and move, and they sold partnerships. We know how that works. But anyway, under their chain, they had to sell.
I'm just sitting here with this, as I'm sure most of the listeners are. It's a heavy story, Julie, and I can't imagine the layered onion of emotions, because you were desperately seeking help. And it was like watching a train derail and you're screaming, doesn't anybody else see this? Like, we can actually get this thing right back on track if we could just all work together. How do you go from there to here? What did your journey look like in the last 7 years? That you're able to have this conversation even. And again, I said it at the beginning, I'm very honored and very grateful for your vulnerability. It is so important that we get these stories out, and not everyone's comfortable sharing their stories. So I give you immense gratitude with honoring us with this. How did you survive this?
God, that's it. I don't know how I survived it. I honestly did not think that I would. Like, when I was on the phone and I heard that he was killed, I crumbled. I fell. Like, I was thrown to the ground. And I remember the next morning, like when I had fallen asleep, and I remember when I woke up thinking, it's going to be so dark. Like, my world is going to be dark. And the sun was shining. And I was shocked. Like, the sun is shining. Like, what is wrong with this world? Because it just felt that bad. And when we had to get dressed, I had to get dressed to go to the sheriff's department. And I was so numb, thinking there's no way this is real. But in that moment, the world looked different. And I don't think that it's ever really looked the same again. But yeah, I stayed in a period of fog for probably heavy for 3 years. Yeah. I don't know. That's the only answer I have is God.
It's a good answer. How did you get the courage and the desire even to develop this 12-week program that you've developed?
I think because I could not find help. And I know that there are other mamas out there who are hurting. And because I know that there are other people out there, I cannot be the only one. And right after Zach's accident, it's like I had this push to write. You need to write. You need to write. Well, I couldn't write. Grammar's bad. I don't know what to say. And looking back, always easy looking back, I should have been writing. But I feel like today my strength is knowing that there's another mama out there. Like, there's another person out there who they don't deserve to sit in the dark alone. And number two, if I can give hope to somebody else, I want to. I don't want to sit 80 more years living this life in pain. And I think that's the other part is I don't want to live a life in pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Scary.
It is scary. And someone was saying, I forget the quote, but someone was saying it to me yesterday, bad things happening isn't always in our control, but suffering kind of is.
Yeah.
Right? In the sense that it takes a tremendous amount of support to even desire to want to not suffer, because sometimes suffering is our lasting link to the person as well. There's sometimes guilt of not suffering when our children are no longer here or a loved one is no longer here. It feels wrong to have joy. So did you experience that?
So I heard you say it takes a tremendous amount of support. But I think for me, I did have support, but maybe not the right support. I had a smothering support that didn't not allow sitting in that pain.
Can you talk about that? That is really important.
Yeah.
Did you have a bunch of people that were wanting you to get over it quicker because it was going to be better for them?
No, yes and no. I feel like I had people that wanted to come over and be with me, and they wanted to be they wanted to support me as a friend would, just to sit with me or just to be with me. But for me, it was a covering of my emotion, and I did not feel comfortable getting them out and releasing them with the people around. So it was basically just pacifying my emotions until they left and I was alone. And then when I was alone, I was having to regurgitate. Well, then somebody would come back. And so it was almost like this pacifying thing. Where I found the support was within myself and was really within calling out and saying, how do I do this? So I finally had to say, nobody can come see me anymore. I have to sit in this pain. And that's when the friendships changed. That's when this loss that people talk about happens. But when, and I hear people say, well, I've lost my friendships. They can't help that. So many people can't carry the heavy. They can't carry your burden. And then so many people like me who are in the suffering, they expect people to carry it. Like, you should understand. Well, you're not going to understand.
No.
So I think for me, it came from really just sitting with myself and just asking, how am I going to do it? What am I going to do? How does it start? I would ask other people, like, can you just give me a direction? Can you just tell me? And nobody could. So I think part of the program has come up with me sharing the steps that I took, which is literally sitting in my pain and asking very specific questions and developing my plan through speaking and talking with God and listening to myself.
You're an amazing person, Julie Spears. And I'm very, very sorry that you had to go through such an incredibly challenging, adverse, traumatic series of experiences, really, in order to get to a point to be able to support people in that particular way. We can't support parents who have lost children as well as you can unless you've lost your child. And I'm grateful that you've chosen, because it is a choice, to take that pain and do something with it. And that's not to shame anybody who's lost a child that didn't have that calling. And that's what I want to call it. It's more of a calling of, like, I feel called to serve in this way. I need to have made this of some purpose. So your story is incredible. It's heartbreaking. We're grateful for you sharing it. Can you tell us a little bit about this 12-week program? And if someone's listening and has been in a similar situation, what would be the benefit of them joining and how could they do it?
Yeah. So for me, the program is all about identifying who I am in the current moment, who do I want to be, and then how do I get there? Which again, it seems so easy, but it's so hard,
Mm-hmm.
And it's when we think about beauty to ashes or ashes to beauty. I have found more confidence in myself, more freedom in myself, and I love myself. And I did not have that before Zach's accident. And a lot of that has come from me sitting in these moments of doing just that. So, what I do is I actually take people through different steps and support them in that pain because you can't go through repurposing or identifying who you are without so many tears. And it's literally taken 7 years for me to get here. So I had to basically just dump out all the worldviews and all of the things that I'd heard as far as it takes 30 days to come up with a habit and keep it stick. That didn't work for me, or if you just talk to this person to go through, that didn't work for me. So what I did is I sit in who I am today, and I dispose the myths. I block off any of the wrongdoings or the wrong sayings, and I literally discover who I am as a daughter of God, and that is I'm a princess. And if I look at how I live today from his eyes, it makes me a totally different person. So through the 12 weeks is basically going through how do you feel about yourself, who do you want to be, and how do we get there through the different steps that you come up in your own mind. And I give framing questions that helps to identify what some of those resources are or how to even begin to step into that true self that you are as a daughter of God.
I love this. And is this available for people online? Can anybody join it?
Anybody can join. It usually takes about 12 weeks. It has taken longer. And for some people, it's taken less time. And then we've come back together. But it is done online.
I love this. How can people find it?
We're working on the website now. So no website, but they can find me on social media at julie.k.spears on Instagram and Facebook.
Very good. So guys, remember that's julie.k.spears. It's SPEARS on Instagram and Facebook. And all of that will be easily found in the show notes. So if somebody doesn't have a pen, you'll be able to find it there. This has been very powerful and very sacred. And I'm very grateful. Is there any last thing that you would like, if someone's listening to this and they're either on this particular journey with their child or they have lost their child, what would you like to share with them?
If you're on the journey, if you're sitting in this madness right now, and you've been seeking hope or talking to people and you cannot find your answers and you're still with the same person, find somebody else. Don't give up. But I also ask that you look within yourself and see what can you do different. If you've already lost a child and you're in that pain, that pain is so bad. If you're in that pain, then I just encourage you to ask yourself, how can you get out of it? And is it worth sitting in it? Because there really is beauty on the other side, and it's so much work, but it's there. And I'm happy to walk with you through it.
Thank you for that. And, as you were mentioning the date, I'm seeing we're right coming up on the anniversary of this. So again, thank you so much, guys. If I'm in tears here. If Julie's story connected with you, please follow her, connect with her. It's julie.k.spears on Instagram as well as on Facebook. And that link is going to be in the show notes. Julie, thank you so much. We really enjoyed having you today. Thanks, guys, for listening. Until next time.